All right, we're back here in the bonus round for our final segment with Michael Pachter, Jason Rubin, and Seamus Blackley. We've been having a great conversation all month about all things gaming, which is what the bonus round is all about. Let's turn, though, to publishers. And, you know, everyone online likes to talk about EA, Activision, Ubisoft, THQ, which we lost this year, unfortunately, but Jason was obviously close to that. Let me start with you, Jason, I guess. I mean, what is the state of, you know, the publisher business and the idea of publishers, you know, funding games from developers, whether they're independent or internal studios? Is that healthy? I mean, how are publishers doing right now?
If you're at the top, if you're one of the top 4, say, or 5 publishers, you're doing quite well. The reduction in competition from the not so big has left you with a massive marketplace that doesn't have a lot of choice.
Yep.
I mean, there's great games, but there aren't that many games coming out, and you've basically been able to take those sales.
Yeah.
On the lower end, with the smaller publishers, it's been incredibly difficult, and as you can see with THQ, some of them have struggled and some of them have collapsed already.
Yeah.
But they're shadows of what they once were. And it's been very difficult.
Now, you know, the bonus round, when we had it, we started it 7 years ago, one of the things we talked about was the idea that there were going to be more and more sequels, you know, to games, because publishers were going to sort of be more risk averse, and we're going to see the same game again and again. We see that increasingly now with, you know, all the publishers producing, you know, a Call of Duty every year, an Assassin's Creed every year. You know, but then we have a GTA that comes out once every 5 years, a massive success. Michael, are we going to see more and more sequels this generation? Is it only going to get worse?
I think that each of the publishers who's still around saved up new IP for this generation. So you've got the Watch Dogs, you've got the Destiny, you've got the Titanfall that are launching. They're not next-gen console exclusive, but they're launching in the next gen.
Yeah.
And I think that the creative people haven't stopped coming up with great ideas. So I actually think you're going to see for the next 3 or 4 years a lot of new IP. Mm-hmm. Then the ones that work are going to get sequel to death because that's just the pattern that works.
Right.
And I need to interject, props to you for turning Saints Row into a full-blown game, because it was a really good game, and I know that
Got a lot of hate for that.
I know that 99% of the smart stuff was done while you were still in charge. So that it turned out to be a great game, and
Turned out to be a fantastic.
and I was really skeptical. When you said it, I was really skeptical.
Volition is an incredibly talented team, and it should be known that I have to say, they have been walking around with a ball and chain on their ankle for years at THQ. And I wish them the best. They're absolutely fantastic, and I would not be surprised if they make a title that becomes a game of the year or something like that, given the ability to do it. Incredible team.
So back to the publisher model.
Yes.
Look, Jason said it well, but there's less competition. The winning formula for the guys who are left is sequel of the same game every year. Take-Two has taken a different approach, and you know they're making a ton of money this year, but they haven't made a lot of money in other years. So we'll see if they get corrupted by their success and they end up doing it. I doubt it, because I don't think the Rockstar guys will do it. But you know the truth is that probably 3/4 of games every year are going to be sequels to old games. And I do think it's a good next few years, because I think we'll get better new IP.
There are sequels and there are sequels. I think Grand Theft Auto is a sequel, but there is so much new, and there are. When we brought out,
brand,
if you go look at, I know this is ancient history, but if you look at Crash 1, Crash 2, Crash 3, we changed the game every time, and we introduced something new, and the sales went up.
Right.
At the same time, Tomb Raider, if you go back that far, if you remember,
Right.
they just put out more levels, and the sales went down over time. There are ways to do sequels, and there are ways not to do sequels. If you put something fresh into it, we all identify with the characters, the world, whatever it is. We want to play more. The nice thing about interactivity is, unlike a story, it doesn't get boring when it's repetitive. You get better at it. That is what interactivity is. So it's adding those fresh things. I think Grand Theft Auto is a perfect example of a sequel done right.
And I actually think Assassin's Creed, especially
They've
these
done a good
last
job.
2 iterations, they've changed up the world. You're in a different period, and it resonates with consumers. So, yeah, I think if you do it right, you do it right.
Said, though, that you know, a lot of gamers get down on sequelitis and the fact that all these sequels are coming out and, you know, blah, 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 it's killing innovation. In some ways, you're right. There are bad sequels. It's disappointing. It sucks when there's nothing to play and you go to the store and it's all sequels. But at the same time, you got to remember that's the revenue safety net that lets the people in charge feel comfortable taking bets on new stuff.
Right.
And anybody who's worked in a big company knows how conservative management can be when there's no cash around. So God bless them for doing the sequels, because that then is the reason that one day in one greenlight meeting, some crazy new team with a crazy idea actually gets the money to do something cool that may grow into the next big franchise.
It's not
That's
that
the engine
different
that
in
does
film.
it.
If you look at the summers, most of the blockbusters are threes and
Yeah.
and up in
But they
some
support
cases.
the cool, more creative art house films that come out at Christmas or something like that. Now we talk about publishing. This generation.
for the new Rocky, by the way, since we were talking about.
What are they on? 8, 7? I think they
No,
stopped.
Rocky in a wheelchair.
They've abandoned the numbers.
Numbers
They're
and
on Balboa.
subtitles. Sorry, Rocky Balboa. The subtitles. Let's talk about the idea of who publishers are these days, because this past generation we've always talked about EA, Ubisoft, Activision, but now you see folks like Riot. You see World of Tanks.
It's weird.
You
It
see
feels
all-
really old school to be talking about EA
Right.
and
So,
Activision. It's
but yeah,
like,
'cause
I'm trapped in the past. I think those are the
and there are
publishers.
all these new companies that are doing really cool, interesting things. And I don't think they're publicly sort of recognized for how innovative their business models. And as you said, you look at some of the valuations on some of these companies in the mobile tablet space. Are those guys going to become the new kings? Are they going to become the folks who then can transition their business over to the console space as well as tablet? I want to get maybe Shane.
Well, let's
start with
think
you on
about what a publisher does.
Right.
Okay, and I think there's a lot of I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding. Right. A publisher is a source of cash. Right. In the past, it had been a source of ability to manufacture physical goods and get them into stores.
Right.
It's a huge deal. Like, no developer can actually do that. So that, I think, of all the things that a publisher can do, you can imagine a developer raising money.
Right.
You've done it. We've all done it. You can imagine a developer getting a game ready and going through tests and getting it set so that the bits are literally ready to go. But you can never imagine a developer hanging out in the garage, with some exceptions,
Right.
Making 4 million copies of a DVD and somehow getting them into the retail channel at Best Buy. So publishers did that, and they existed because, and we mentioned this a couple of sessions ago. They did this because there was a moment in time at which the economy required that there be, a business unit like this that could do financing and could, put these products out, because the cost of making the software went past the point where, and this is what happened before publishers, guys would put their game on a disc and drive around to local software stores with it in a baggie, and a lot of people made a lot of money. Origin Systems started out that way. Ken and Roberta Williams started out that with Sierra Online.
My first game was in a Ziploc.
Sure, and a lot of people who are our age had that experience of driving around or having your mom drive you around, and you try to give this game that you wrote to some stores, and then it sells and you have $20 and it's crazy.
Yeah.
When it grew past that, which is a beautiful time, it grew past that, suddenly you needed this operation that could take the financial burden for you and also effectively be your mom driving to every store and and putting it places, not only in the US and then worldwide, and dealing with this stuff. And then that grew into the backbone of the business. Okay, and now the world changes underneath that, and maybe doesn't need that anymore in a lot of ways. It doesn't need it maybe in mobile so much. A lot of game developers can self-publish in mobile. There's no reason not to.
Yeah.
Right? At some point, though, the capabilities of the mobile devices will get good enough. The GPUs will be strong enough that they can run a lot of art. Now you have a big art budget. Okay, well now your bet, instead of being $120,000 in 6 months with your friends to make a game, becomes $2 million. Okay, and now you're back at the point where EA started. You're back at this place where the investment is a little bit too big, and the need to make that investment back through advertising, through co-marketing, through making sure that you have customers you keep track of, all of those services that developers traditionally haven't put that into. That's actually very hard culturally to integrate that stuff into a development environment, can be off-put under the right business model to a publisher, and that's where they arose. So it almost seems like when we get to the point in the mobile and tablet space and the emerging indie space where that business model has a vacuum drawing it in again, maybe a new crop of guys will come in.
All right, guys, hold that thought. We're going to be right back here on the bonus round.
Having run a publisher for a brief period, I'd say you could super simplify.
And
There's three arms. There's development, there's marketing, and there's publishing, the packaging.
Yeah.
the packaging is going to become meaningless in the long run. So I think that era is kind of behind us and is moving further away. So the question is,
Which was the strongest safety leg of the business
well,
for 2
it
decades.
was the value, and it was, in many ways, publishers were run by the packaging
Get distribution.
and distribution arms more than they were development or marketing for a long time. I think there's still a value in the marketing groups and in understanding marketing as games get bigger, as you have to fight to get your product noticed in a store, as games get larger and the budgets get larger, they have to get themselves out in front of a certain number of people so that they get an installed base large enough when they launch to deal with the multiplayer. And there are reasons for the marketing. And as games get more expensive, developers want a publisher to help them fund it.
Right.
So there will be a reason for publishers to be around. They simply will have to jettison the actual physical boxing crap, because that's dead. That's long term.
the
That's
question
dead.
though,
That economic sweet spot where it makes sense to bring up a partner on for a lot of these
Absolutely. I
developers,
can tell you at Naughty Dog, we funded our own products until we hit about $4 million.
Right.
And we were very successful. After $4 million, you start to get the shakes.
And-
You're putting a lot of your own money at risk.
In your question, you mentioned Riot, you mentioned Supercell. I think that if you think about the other publishers, so not the big public company guys, they're all largely one success. So Rovio, Angry Birds, and I know there's like 16 Angry Birds, and Supercell, I know they have 2 games, but Clash of Clans is a big one. Gung Ho, Puzzles and Dragons, Riot, League of Legends. It's not like any of these guys have a bunch of different franchises, and so
I wouldn't call them publishers.
No, but he did.
Abstracted.
He did.
We're talking
He
about
did.
publishers in the abstracted
he
development.
did.
grow into
So
I think
so I
it's an
think
interesting to
no,
watch. What about Facebook's publishing operation? You know,
I-
what
well, I
about
think
other
the
companies like
definition
that
of-
who are thinking about publishing?
we're going the same place. I think the definition of publisher is somebody could put together a portfolio who then has the synergy of a big marketing organization that can market it,
Move people
who
between
can
games.
who can raise capital because everybody's got different kind of views about what's going to work and not work. So if you have a portfolio, it's safer for the investor,
raise
and they
cheaper
can
capital.
fund and they can take the flyer on this more than $4 million project that Jason can't mortgage his house and risk being on the street if it fails. And so, I think that. So I think they're going to always have a
You
place.
can
I
scrape
really
together
do.
Angry Birds money. Once you get to
Right.
the point where you're raising $8 million, the people you raise that money from will look at you and say, too big a risk for me to put all of my investment in one space. So I want to take the money I would give you and give it to an organization that's going to do 30 games like you're doing.
Right.
And I'm going to amortize my risk across
Roll the
all
dice.
of those 30 games. And if any of them hit, I'll do better than I would have
So
advertised,
that's
you know.
what a publisher is, and I think the reason
And there's a need for that
and the
long-term.
reason Midway went away and Acclaim went away and 3DO went away is that they didn't put together a large enough portfolio to support the organization that they built. And THQ was right on the edge of making it back again, but didn't. But we now have in the West four real publishers. You got Ubi, Take-Two.
THQ could have been
They're
a
right
large
there.
publisher. They made 2 or 3 massive, colossal mistakes in a row, and that'll wipe a publisher out. I mean, UDraw clearly one of them, spending millions and millions of dollars on an MMO that never came out. If either one of those 2 things hadn't happened,
They'd still be gone.
I'd be running THQ, and
Right.
THQ would have a chance to be a
Agreed.
relatively large publisher. But they made all of those mistakes and more
Right.
on top of each other, and that destroyed the organization.
So I think that we will always need that type of know-how, that type of
Right.
expertise. I think that these as we talk about the continuum of all the developers, the guys making mobile games for 120,000, as they migrate toward that 4 million and higher budget, they're going to need access to capital. They're going to need access to marketing because they're not going to drive around with a baggie with a floppy in it. And so I think they're going to be here.
Access to an organization of people with a level of abstraction you can't get in your business is a very, very valuable thing. Having somebody around who's thinking about the abstracted problem of getting your game out and where it's going in the marketplace is something that, again, it's a huge distraction to a developer. And there's a great value in being able to be siloed as a developer. If you know you have support behind you, if you know there are people thinking about where you fit in the marketplace, and who your customer is, and how the advertising is going to work, then all you think about is making your game awesome. And that is an incredible advantage. And more than anything else, I think that's what the publisher can do at
I've
the base of the
always
business
been
model.
pro-developer. I have a
Right.
history of being pro-developer.
Absolutely.
Go back and look. There was never a time where I've complained about Sony. The support that Naughty Dog gets from Sony is a big part of the secret for why Naughty Dog is
such great games.
successful
Yeah.
time and again, because they don't have to worry about the capital.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry about all of the nonsense that has nothing to do with making games, like payroll and this. I mean, you'd be shocked how much of running a business, running a
Gets
game
in the way
business
of-
isn't making games. They don't have to worry about any of that. They can focus on the games, and Sony has been, since I was there,
Yeah.
since we started working, an absolutely incredible partner in making those titles. So publishers are good
Yeah.
for developers in the right circumstances.
All right, well, it's been a great time chatting with all you guys. Before we go, though, so we're wrapping up sort of the new consoles here and this segment. Pactor, what are you thinking prediction-wise? Sony, Microsoft, how's it going to turn out?
Next few months, I think they both sell out. I think that if either of them gathers dust on the shelf, it'll be the Xbox One because of the price point. Next year, I'd say Sony outsells Microsoft by 25%. So probably 12 million to 9 million or something like that. And I think Sony keeps the lead until Microsoft cuts the price or explains to us why that Kinect is actually worth an extra $100.
So long term, when we roll the tape back 7 years from now, what do you think is going to happen?
I think Microsoft, in a year or two, Microsoft will cut price. They'll be priced the same. They'll sell neck and neck. Sony gets an early lead. Microsoft claws its way back. I think the value in the consoles is going to be in the software and it's going to be in the services like Xbox Live, like PlayStation Network. And I think those are in early days of the service offering. So I think they're going to get better and better and better, and people are going to really like them. But I'd say pretty close. I think they'll probably be about where they came out this cycle, probably pretty even. And both bigger than last cycle because the Wii U is going to sell 20% as many units as the Wii. So, I mean, there's a lot of market share to capture, even though a lot of people aren't buying another console.
Ruben?
I went and looked at this morning. I watched, I saw the Hot Pockets ad. So buy Hot Pockets keeps him in the money. Apparently, it was like 10 Hot Pockets ads as I watched the previous game trailer. I feel like I need a Hot Pocket for some reason. I picked PlayStation 1. I said this 2006, and I picked PlayStation 1. I picked PlayStation 2. I was, of the three of us there, the most positive on Xbox in the last generation, although at the end of the day, I succumbed to his wit and arguments and said probably Sony would win in the long run. That didn't happen. Microsoft won this time. Tried until this moment to get myself to a point where I felt comfortable making a bet on one or the other.
Yes.
For the first time,
Yes.
I can't call it.
Really? Yeah.
I really can't call it this time. I have no feeling long term who's going to do better. I see strong reasons for Sony to come out of the gate ahead of Microsoft. Strong reasons.
Yeah.
But I also see a lot of value in exactly the things that Microsoft stumbled in explaining in the long run.
Yep.
And the question is, will Sony get ahead far enough, and will Microsoft stumble far enough that no one ever cares, right? That there's no reason to buy it even though it has some long-term strengths. I can't make a call.
Could they both do
I
worse?
don't want to come on this show and be the guy that can't make the call, but I can't make a call. But they will do, for the next few years, extremely well, again, because Nintendo has stumbled. So Nintendo's irrelevant as a hardware manufacturer in the console business, right?
You'll get a few tweets about that one. All right. Seamus.
Their own numbers.
They're on numbers.
Look at the financials.
You see, just read their annual report. Damn it.
More Wii's than Wii U's. I mean, it's,
Hey, man, I still play Wii Sports. That's an excellent game.
and again,
It was.
before the
That's a
hate mail
blast.
comes in,
Yes.
I will say that whichever camera is on right now, a worldwide treasure, Nintendo. There is no developer. As a developer, I can say there is no developer that will ever be Miyamoto. It is a crime that we do not play those games on the systems that we have
No, that's
as a community.
It's a horrible. It's tragic actually that Nintendo hasn't assumed their position, in the constellation of entertainment giants because they're every bit of Disney, and it's strange. It's strange. So I think a lot like Jason, I have a hard time thinking about the problem in terms of will Microsoft or Sony eventually prevail. I think that I think the real thing that's going to happen is that the marketplace and the business is evolving rapidly. And as brands that are representative of a business model and a specific marketplace, those guys are going to find success or failure. So I think maybe in 7 years it's going to be the case that we're talking about the Microsoft service and the Sony service and its associated cluster of hardware.
Sure.
Okay, and then other stuff, Apple, maybe it's Amazon, who knows?
Valve.
Right, Valve. And the conversation we're going to be having is going to be really different. And it may not even be possible for us to think anymore about whether or not one of those hardware platforms was successful, because it seems like this is the generation where it's going to kind of transcend that and become something more, but also something less. It just becomes a relationship that I have as a gamer with somebody who can sell me games. And I'm going to do business with whichever one of those entities is selling me the games that I want to play. And I think that it becomes, in the next 5 years, really a ubiquitous business pressure on all of these guys to make sure that if they have a piece of content that's popular, it's going to play on whatever device the consumer has.
It is quite possible that Xbox Live will outlive a Microsoft console. We're talking deep future.
Yeah.
And that PSN will outlive any hardware specifically designed to go on your set-top box, and will be relevant in gaming for decades. And the center of the world that you play games will be these software infrastructures. That is certainly possible.
On the other hand, remember, software runs best on hardware.
Note to leave us on. All right, well, guys, thanks for an awesome bonus round. It's been fun having you on. We will see you guys next week for an all-new bonus round right here on GT.